Get closer. Now they can.
Okay. All right, we're going to get started here. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight for the Umatilla Morrow County Connect Project Notice of Intent Informational Meeting. Tonight, we'll be providing information about the proposed facility and the Energy Facility Siting Council review process. We will also be providing an opportunity for public questions and comments after the presentation. My name is Chase McMinn-Walker. I'm a senior siting analyst at the Oregon Department of Energy in the siting division. It's our responsibility to process and review the application for this facility once we receive it, and to ultimately provide recommendations to the Energy Facility Siting Council. The Energy Facility Siting Council has jurisdiction over this proposed transmission line, and they will ultimately make the decision on whether or not to approve or deny the application. I'm joined here tonight by my colleague Sarah Esperson, Senior Policy Advisor at the Siting Division, Kathleen Sloan, Senior Siting Analyst in the Siting Division, and Nancy Hatch, our Division Administrative Assistant. Do we have any council members online? I don't know if that's available. People can be muted or unmuted. I think we were expecting one council member online.
Hello, Anna. I'm getting for a moment with council member Byron.
Okay.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Bye. We also have the applicant, Umatilla Electric Cooperative, in the room as well. And following my portion of the presentation tonight, Umatilla Electric will be providing a presentation. We'll be following my presentation with a few started on the presentations. This meeting will be recorded, is recorded, and will be posted to the project webpage for this facility, along with a copy of the presentation slides tonight. Presentation slides, in fact, are already on the project website. And I will be providing the link to the project webpage later in my presentation, should anyone like to write a link. After I provide an overview of the Energy Facility Siting Council process, the applicant team will describe their proposed facility. We then will open up the meeting to questions and comments from the public, but please hold questions and comments until we get to the portion of the presentation. Next slide, please. This is just an overview agenda of what I just said. And let's see. I think next slide, please. Getting into it. On September 22nd, 2023, Oregon Department of Energy, or ODO, received a notice of intent to file an application for a site certificate for the Umatilla Morrow, which is a 230 kilovolt transmission line with 4 proposed route alternatives traversing both Morrow and Umatilla counties. The length of the proposed transmission line ranges from approximately 13 to 15 miles, depending on the selected route alternative. And the submission of the notice of intent is the very first step in the FSEC review process of obtaining a site certificate. And the NOI was submitted by Umatilla Electric Cooperative, their applicant. This informational meeting is intended to give members of the public an opportunity to learn about the proposal and provide comments on the NOI. Notice of intent. It is not a contested case hearing. and participation in this meeting is not required to preserve issues or standing for the contested case. As I mentioned at the forefront of the presentation, please hold your comments, questions until the comment period at the end of the presentation. And please be respectful. We have a lot of material that we want to get through and make sure, so we want to make sure we have time for everyone's comments at the end of the meeting. Next slide, please. The siting division at the Oregon Department of Energy serve as technical staff of the Energy Facility Siting Council, which I'll refer to as FSEC or Council from here in New York. And the Energy Facility Siting FSEC reviews applications and amendments for site certificates that fall under their jurisdiction. The council consists of up to 7 members serving in a volunteer capacity. Council members are appointed by the governor and approved by the Oregon Senate. Additionally, the council represents diverse professional backgrounds from across the state. And while ODO's staff makes recommendations to FSEC, it is FSEC that's the final decision-making authority for energy facilities under jurisdiction, including this proposed transmission line. In addition to reviewing projects seeking a permit known as a site certificate, the siting division does have a compliance program that oversees compliance with each approved facility, each site certificate, including during the pre-construction, construction, operations, and decommissioning phases. We conduct site visits at least annually and more frequently when the facility is under construction. The FSEC process as a whole is a consolidated review process between state and local governments. It is set forth in Oregon administrative rules and Oregon revised statutes with a set of 16 general standards for review. What this means is a developer can obtain most of the major state approvals and the local land use approval through the FSEC process if the council issues an approval or a site certificate for the facility. The intent is to eliminate the duplication and sometimes conflict between different permitting timelines, decisions, and appeal paths. While this provides more certainty for a developer, in the sense that the major permits will either all be approved or all be denied, this also provides the public one regulatory process to track. Because this is a consolidated review process, public participation as well as participation from state agencies, local governments, and tribal governments is even more important. In a few minutes, I'll discuss this as a whole further and how and when you can get involved. You may have heard me use the word siting several times now. Siting refers to reviewing a proposed energy facility against a number of predetermined requirements known as standards based on site-specific locational issues that may be affected by the facility. On the next slide, I will be discussing FSEC standards. Please note that land acquisitions, land leases, and easements are all outside of the FSEC process. Next slide, please. Before a jurisdictional facility is built in Oregon, the developer must apply for a site certificate from the Energy Facility Siting Council. The types of facilities subject to council jurisdiction are defined in Oregon Revised Statute 469-300. Are also listed on the screen. The definition of energy facility is also located within that statute reference. And I just wanted to point out that high voltage transmission lines are included in that definition. Next slide, please. For high voltage electrical transmission lines, a project, in order to be state jurisdictional, has to be greater than 10 miles in length, equal or greater to 230 kilovolts, and must cross more than one jurisdiction. This proposed project fits all three, and that is why it is state jurisdictional going through the FSEC process. Next slide, please. In order to issue a site certificate, the Energy Facility Siting Council must determine that the facility complies with all applicable council standards or the overall public benefits of the overall public benefits of the facility outweigh any adverse effects on a resource or interest protected by the standards the facility does not meet. The facility must also determine that the facility complies with all other Oregon laws, rules identified in the project order, or as amended and as applicable to the issuance of a site certificate for the proposed facility. And lastly, council must determine that the facility complies with the statewide land use planning goals. Next slide. The FSEC process is a standard-based process. It's the applicant's burden of proof to demonstrate compliance with all applicable standards and rules. Every project has to meet the same 16 general standards, as well as some additional standards that apply to specific facility types. For this particular facility, the siting standard for transmission lines would apply and requires that the applicant design, construct, and operate the facility to comply with specific requirements relating to alternating current, electric fields, and reduced currents. These standards incorporate local government and state agency requirements and include protections for fish and wildlife habitat, public services, land use, structural safety, cultural resources, among other resources. FSEC cannot change the standards without undergoing rulemaking. So, for example, there isn't an air quality standard, and there wouldn't be unless there was a rulemaking effort made. The magnitude of what an applicant has to provide to document that they have met the burden of proof for each standard varies based on type of facility and the location of the facility, proposed facility. For example, if a project is proposed in an industrial zone property in an urban environment, the Fish and Wildlife standard will likely be very easy to meet. Whereas a project proposed in an undisturbed natural area would likely require a substantial amount of on-the-ground survey work and mitigation requirements. It's the department's role to evaluate all of the evidence, in addition to any comments received from the public, tribal governments, state agencies, and local governments, to determine whether or not the applicant has met the burden of proof for each standard. We then, the department, make our recommendation to FSEC, who evaluates all of this information in the record and comes to a decision. If council decides that all of the applicable standards are met, the council must issue a site certificate. Just as the county must issue a permit. Neither the council nor staff can propose to put the facility in a different location. We must instead evaluate what is proposed by the applicant. Because we are at the notice of intent stage, we seek any type of comment anyone wants to provide. However, when we get to the next stage in the process, focusing comments on the standards is more important since FSEC's authority is limited to those standards. And they are all that can be evaluated to approve or deny the project. Next slide, please. Okay, here's a flow chart of the major steps in the FSEC review process. There's 7 major steps in this FSEC review process. I'd like to emphasize that we are at the very beginning of the FSEC process itself. For those on the webinar and in the room, the first stage of this process is the notice of intent stage, and there's a red box around this first step to indicate where we are. Also on this chart, you can see the green boxes, which indicate opportunities for public participation in the FSEC review process. We do have additional information, a public guide available on our webpage, on our website, for those that would like to get into more detail on steps. So because we're at the first step, the applicant has submitted the NOI. They submitted it on September 22nd, 2023. The NOI provides basic information about the proposal, also includes or indicates the permits that the facility may require, potential impacts to various resources, and a listed map of properties that would be crossed by the facilities. The NOI is valid for 2 years. That means the applicant has until September 22nd, 2025 to submit their application once the department has issued a project order. However, in the case of this particular project, the applicant has indicated they will submit their application by or in July of next year, 2024. At this time, at the end of this presentation, we'll be soliciting comments from the public and state agencies, local governments, and tribal governments. And the public comment period for comments on the NOI closes December 1st for this year, 2023. After we've received all comments, the department will release a project order, which will list the application submittal requirements in applicable statutes, rules, and standards. It's the second step of this chart. Based on the application, the department will, once the project order is issued, the applicant will submit an application. And from there, the department will review the application in coordination with state agencies, local governments, and tribal governments. This process does take some time, as there's regularly additional requests for additional information provided by the department to the applicant that the applicant must address before the department can determine that the application is complete. Once completeness is determined on an application, the department will hold an informational meeting. Another informational meeting. That's another opportunity to comment. Following receipt of a complete application, the department will then prepare a draft proposed order, which contains our recommended findings of compliance or non-compliance with citing standards, as well as the conditions we recommend council impose under each of those standards, each of those 16 general standards and additional. We'll initiate another round of public involvement once we issue the draft proposed order. At that stage, there will be a public comment period and a public hearing. Persons who wish to contest the project must participate during the DPO public hearing to be potentially eligible to participate in the case. Following issuance of the DPO, the proposed order will be issued, and that will contain changes to the draft proposed order based on feedback received from council and reviewing agency partners and the public. At the proposed order, those who commented on the draft proposed order may request party status in the contested case. Following the conclusion of the contested case, or if no persons request party status in the contested case, the council will issue a final decision on whether to approve or deny a site certificate. If council authorizes the site certificate and the developer seeks to make any major changes to the facility in the future, the developer will need to request an amendment to the site certificate, which will initiate another round of council review and public participation. What is not on this flowchart slide is the appeal path. Final FSEC decisions are appealable directly to the Oregon Supreme Court, and they have 6 months within which to issue their final opinion. Next slide, please. I've said it a few times in my presentation thus far, reviewing agency. And reviewing agencies are state agencies, local governments, tribal governments, and in some cases, federal agencies that we at the Oregon Department of Energy seek input from during our review of proposed facilities. These agencies and governments help us determine what studies should be conducted, which permits are required, and what statutes, administrative rules, and government ordinances apply to a specific facility. At this point in our process, we've already reached out to each reviewing agency to solicit comments during the NOI phase, and we'll continue to coordinate with our reviewing agency partners throughout the review of this proposed facility. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, we're in the notice of intent stage, and the notice of intent really is desktop level analysis of a proposed project. While we're happy to receive comments, any comments, we're particularly at this point in our process interested in comments that are related to specific resources. As part of the notice of intent, the applicant had to conduct desktop studies for resources within and near the site boundary using the specific distances shown on this slide. For example, for the fish and wildlife habitat and land use resources, desktop studies were conducted within a half mile of the site. Threatened and endangered species and recreational opportunities had a study area of 5 miles. And for scenic resources and public services, there was a 10 miles study area. Based on what we hear from you tonight, reviewing agencies, and anyone throughout this NOI comment period, these study area distances may stay the same or they may be increased or decreased. Study areas determine how far out from the proposed facility the applicant must evaluate potential impacts to a given resource. An evaluation of impacts. Some of these resources can involve significant on-site survey work, such as field surveys to evaluate impacts to fish and wildlife habitat or endangered species. If you have any thoughts or comments on or about potential impacts of the project or to resources, please include those in your comments if you provide comments tonight. Next slide, please. In the FSEC process, applicants may elect to undergo the local land use review process or seek the council land use determination. In the case of this project, the applicant has requested that the council make a land use determination. In the notice of intent, the applicant has indicated that the local land use requirements of Umatilla and Morrow counties would be consolidated into the city review. However, the applicant can change up that decision on what land use review process they want to seek up until the point they submit their application. In recognition that Umatilla and Morrow counties both are experts of their own land use codes and ordinances, the department appointed both the Umatilla County Board of Commissioners and the Morrow County Board of Commissioners as a special advisory group for this project, so 2 special advisory groups. The department has requested that both Morrow County and Umatilla County provide a list of the local applicable substantive criteria the facility would be evaluated against. Next slide, please. Following the applicant's portion of this presentation, the public will have an opportunity to provide verbal comments on the proposed facility. The public also has an opportunity to submit written comments throughout the end of the day on December 1st, 2023. These comments and all comments are part of the record and will be made available to the applicant. Next slide. Just in general, the department has created a lot of information in hopes that it would be helpful to the process. Our website contains a public guide, as I mentioned, and a series of handouts to help better explain the FSEC process and how it works, and how to participate in that process in general. The website also includes options to sign up to receive email notices on specific facilities or rulemakings, and to also comment on citing projects. Here on the bottom of this slide is in green is the URL for this particular project page. I guess we could leave this up for a short bit should anyone like to write it down or take a photo. That said, as a reminder, these slides are already available on our project page. Navigate to it. And lastly, next slide. This is my contact information. For those listening over the phone, my phone number is 971-600-5323. My name is Chase McVay-Walker. Please feel free, anyone, to contact me with any questions that you may have. With that, I'll now turn things over to the applicant to both introduce themselves and provide more specific information about the project.
Thank you, Chase, and thank you to the Department of Energy and the Council for allowing us to speak on behalf of the Umatilla Morrow County Connect project. Thank you all in attendance this evening and virtually. We appreciate the interest in our project. Thank you for attending tonight. My name is Weston Putman, Manager of Public Relations for Umatilla Electric Cooperative. This evening, I am joined by Manager of Engineering for UEC, Cole Bodie, Land Use Specialist for Umatilla Electric, Patrick Collins, and together we are joined by several representatives from Power Engineers, who is a consultant supporting and assisting UEC on this project. So as Chase mentioned, our presentation, or our focus of our presentation, is going to be more focused on the details and a little bit of the facts and figures of the project itself. So with any project, regardless of size that Umatilla Electric is getting ready to undertake or recommending or proposing, we do what we call analysis to identify a purpose and need. And for this instance, it's a purpose and need for new transmission. As Chase mentioned, is a 230 kilovolt transmission line. During this analysis, we were actually able to identify 3 that we believe will bring value from the UMCC project. And I'm going to go through it briefly in this slide, but then the next slide, I want to share a map that we feel brings a little bit more value to each, and then I'm going to be able to talk to each through. So the first one is to increase system reliability and capacity of Umatilla Electric's 230 kV transmission line or system. The second one is to support economic development and future growth within the region. Again, that's both Umatilla and Morrow counties and really Eastern Oregon as a whole. And the third one is to create a transmission path for renewable energy. So now I'd like to share the map on the screen. And as you can see, I want to start with the first one again, increase system reliability and capacity. As you can see on the screen, the 2 green lines represent Umatilla Electric's current 230 kilovolt transmission system. As you can see, we have one on the east side near Hermiston and Umatilla in Umatilla County. On the west side, we have one in Boardman in Morrow County. However, what you don't see is a line connecting the 2. What the UMCC project would do is create an added layer of reliability and resiliency to this system. So as of now, and with what we currently have, if a major outage, natural disaster, weather event, whatever it may be, were to take out either system, with our current capacity, we are very limited to what we're able to do from an outage restoration perspective in a timely and restoral matter. This would create an added layer of redundancy. So if anything were to happen in Boardman or Hermiston, and this all went out for whatever reason, we would be able to reroute power directly to the other 230 kV, creating an added layer of resiliency. For number 2, again, to assist and support economic development and future growth in the region. And for this, I want to highlight a certain area that some of you may be familiar with in recent years, and especially in recent months. As we know, the Army Chemical Depot transferred ownership to the Columbia Development Authority, and with that, we as the electric utility, Umatilla Electric, are anticipating a lot of growth, a lot of development from economic job standpoint coming into the area, and we want to be able to support and aid in that growth for both Umatilla and Morrow counties. And the third one is to provide a clear transmission path for renewable energy. So as we have seen the state of Oregon's mandates and standards continue to increase and evolve, this path would, or this project would help create that path to help Umatilla Electric and our communities reach some of those standards and reach some of those mandates. So that's a little bit about how we got to where we are tonight, talking about the purpose and need of the project. Now I'd like to take some time to talk about the project itself. So currently we're looking at a double circuit 230 kilovolt transmission system using steel single poles. I'd like to reference the image on the screen. This is an actual render of what a pole may look like for this project. The endpoints, which is basically point A to point B, is Umatilla Electric's Highway 730 switchyard in Morrow County. And the project would head east to UEC's Ordnance switchyard in Umatilla County. And from point A to point B, that's looking approximately like 14 miles. And the height of the structures, the height of the steel single poles, vary, but typically they are 90 to 120 feet. And the span between structures, so that's pole to pole, again, vary, but typically 600 feet. So that just gives you some facts and figures on the project itself. And then we take it a step further and we perform what is called a route analysis or a route study. And as you can see, we have a defined area that we define as our study area. But to go into more detail and provide a little bit of more information, I would now like to introduce Derek Vowles with our engineers. Thank you.
Thanks, Weston. Yeah, so as Weston was describing, the first step in our routing study is to establish a study area. And so what we've tried to do is to give us multiple options between point A and point B here. And so you'll see to the left of the screen is
This is Bombing Range Road over here. So we wanted to look at options coming in from the west. We also want to look at options south of I-84. So we included roads, existing power lines in that area. We also wanted to give us some options to the north of I-84, and so we had a little band up there. And so that's kind of the starting place. And I'll kind of talk through the different steps of how we've gone through the routing process. The first step is a desktop exercise where we pull existing information, biological, different land use, cultural resources, all things that are publicly available about the study area. Also look at some of the more engineering details where the existing roads, existing utilities, canals, agricultural pivots, and so forth. So once we establish what's out there, we assign a sensitivity level to that. And the purpose of this is we want to equalize all the different factors out there and identify what's going to have the biggest impact on the area. So basically we rank things high, medium, low. So for this study area, something that is high could be or was a pivot, an agricultural pivot. Also federal land, or if there's any endangered species, those were also looked at high. An example of something that is a lower sensitivity is if it's industrial land, commercial land, there's no residential, there's no sensitive species around there, that's going to be on the low side of things. And then the next step here is, once we've identified all these different sensitivity areas, we start to put like a spider web of route links within the study area. These are all the different potential areas that could connect us from point A to point B. And we go through systematically and we compare the common endpoints of each of these different route links. And we start to eliminate which ones score better than others. And so we look at a variety of factors. We look at different land use, we look at residential, and we score these things. And we start to eliminate it down to the point where we have end-to-end routes. And what we've arrived at for this study is we have 4 end-to-end routes, and that's what you'll see on the boards, and I'll have a slide of that here in a bit. So I talked about sensitivity, and how we use this information is we composite that information, kind of like a sheet of plywood. So we take the land use information, the biological information, we look at floodplains, cultural resources, and we take all this information and we compress it together. And so we give ourselves a map that just shows what are all the high, medium and low sensitivity areas. And so we're not biasing it just based on what type of resource it is. And this is the map of what our study area looks like once we've gone through and done that composite sensitivity. So you can see there's a lot of red. And that's really driven largely by all the agricultural pivots. There's other factors that go in there as well. You'll see on the up here on the old Army Depot, there's some red. That's actually potential habitat for Washington ground squirrel. So that's the reason that's mapped that way. One of the other important things to point out in this graphic here is, even though there's a lot of red, there's some blue woven in between, and the blue is our opportunities. And so what we consider the opportunities, as I mentioned before, roads, power lines, could be rail lines. It's basically where there's anything that's already built that you can kind of parallel that's going to have less of an impact. So going back, you look at the blue, and then you go to the next slide. This is all our potential route links. And so you can see it aligns pretty closely with the blue, with so many different high sensitivity constraints with the pivots. It really leaves us just kind of where are the areas where there's the roads and power lines as the best opportunities to site a line. And you'll see, we generally, as we pare these down, we want to at least give ourselves kind of 3 options as much as we can kind of throughout. And you'll start to see these end-in routes kind of get pared down in that fashion. So what you'll see here, this is where we've arrived. These are our 4 end-to-end routes. And so I kind of want to talk through where we've eliminated some of these route links and the reasons why. On the west side of the study area along Bombing Range Road, this area to the west is the naval bombing range. There's constraints on how far you can move into that property. There's also existing transmission on both the east and the west side of Bombing Range Road. And from a engineering feasibility standpoint, there really wasn't room for another line. And so what that's done is all these southern routes, all these route links here were really put in place to potentially serve an opportunity when up Bombing Range Road. And so when we're going from point A to point B here, dipping down this far south it's not really too feasible. Another thing is routes that were kind of in the middle of the study area, but south of I-84. During some of the initial outreach with landowners, we received some feedback, some preference against some of those routes. And so that was also a part of the reason that we eliminated some of those routes kind of in the center of the study area. And so what we have here on the north, I mentioned that we try to give ourselves 3 opportunities. However, with the transfer of the depot to the Columbia Development Authority, UEC was able to sign an easement across that property. And so that allows us confidence that we have a route that goes across the CDA. And so what we're really looking at is we've got 4 different options to the west of the CDA property. And then there's 2 options here to the west or to the east where it crosses I-82 there. I think that's kind of the key points on those routes there. So that was an overview of our routing study. Now for the FSEC process, we need to identify a site boundary in the NOI kind of moving forward. And this basically, what this represents is the potential temporary or permanent disturbance as a result of the project. This yellow polygon is much larger than we're going to need for the project. We kept it a little bit larger on the CDA. So when we do further surveys, before we submit the application, we're going to need to do cultural surveys. We're going to need to do biological surveys, some other engineering work. It gives us some latitude if there's things that we discovered to engineer around that. And this, you'll also see there's a lot of, while there are a lot of straight lines, some of the lines that dip out that are kind of like semicircles around the corners, those are more for temporary disturbance for pulling and tensioning sites. So when you string the line, the conductor up, you need a little bit more room to pull that line to tighten it. And so that's what that represents. And when we actually prepare our application and move forward, we expect that this area is going to shrink as we have a little bit more confidence in the actual areas that we need for planned disturbance. So going through the schedule here, some of this stuff Chase has already talked a little bit about, just kind of recapping. We took about a year for the routing study. We took a lot of time. I mean, the desktop part is quick. The part that takes a little bit more time is meeting with landowners and stakeholders. And as a result of some of that initial outreach, we do feel confident in the route alternatives that we have going forward. We did submit the NOI to ODO on September 13th. We're anticipating Q2 to have our application in. The big reason for this is there's a Washington ground squirrel survey that needs to be done in April, May. And so that's an annual survey. It's the only time of year you can do that survey. And so that's kind of a big driver of why we're looking at submitting this application a little bit after that. final order, site certificate. So again, there's different factors that are out of our control, and ODOT obviously processes things as quick as they can. This is just an anticipated time frame around Q1, 2025, which would mean we would be ready to start construction in Q2 and have things wrapped up by the end of 2025. I'm going to hand this back over to Weston to talk about the outreach that we've done.
Thank you, Derek. And again, thank you, Chase, the department, and the council for allowing us to talk about the project. As you can see on the screen, there's materials that we have put together leading up to tonight's meeting, and we'll continue to produce materials to help communicate this project. It's available around the room if you are interested. There's a 11 by 17 map, foam boards around the room if you're interested. For those joining virtually and in person as well, we do have a website, umccproject.com, that has a lot more of this information, as well as an email at umccproject@umatillelectric.com if you have any questions or concerns. And with that, I would like to pass it back to Chase.
Thank you very much, Wes. We're now going to open up our Q&A portion of the evening. Public comment on this NOI. This slide explains how to participate in our Q&A portion. We'll first take questions and comments from people in the room and in person tonight. We'll follow in-person commenters by people on the webinar itself and people over the phone. If there's numerous people wishing to comment tonight, we may need to impose a time limit on comments. So be respectful, so everyone has an opportunity to ask questions and make comments. Okay, in person, let's see, our first comment sheet is Jeremy Adair. Jeremy, would you like to comment up and provide comments? Thank you very much.
Great, good evening all. My name is Jeremy Adair. I currently reside in John Day, Oregon. By trade, I'm a journeyman line. 23 years. Currently employed with the International Brotherhood of Workers IBW. For 2 years now. IBW 125 represents approximately 4,000 members in the utility, line construction, and line defense sector. IBW Local 125 supports the Umatilla Morrow County Connect project and has no opposition. We support the proposed routes, in opposition to the alternate routes, because we are confident that the applicant possesses the necessary organizational experience and will meet its obligations under the Oregon Energy Facility Siting Council's various standards, including those focused on safety. Port of Morrow, Umatilla County, and Morrow County have continued to be leaders in our state in the Pacific Northwest regarding energy-related issues, and they have done so by meeting the needs of multiple stakeholders, including tribal government and land. With increased energy needs combined with pressures to meet clean energy goals, this project is critical to Eastern Oregon's economic, climate, and overall energy goals. We offer our support for Umatilla Electric cooperative application. The Umatilla Morrow County Connect project is an important part of critical infrastructure that will support resiliency goals while providing new opportunities for the area, which will boost economic opportunities. While EFC's standards don't create jobs, it is important to know that this project will provide a significant number of family wage jobs that will allow many workers the opportunity to work locally. These types of projects may offer new career options for underrepresented communities without them leaving Eastern Oregon in some way. We respectfully request that council approve. Thank you.
Very much, Jeremy. Next on the comment cards is Tamara Mavin.
Thank you, evening. Happy to be here for the record. I'm Tamara Mavin from Morrow County Planning Director. Nice presentation. Thank you very much. I was hoping you could speak a little bit about the involvement process of the underlying plans and sort of outreach you've done with those, and if they seem amenable to an easement on those. And then the last part would be when explaining the process from acquiring the easement. Actually, the fourth piece would also be if you have resistance from a landowner, will that change the routing? Just to adjust them. It's no surprise that we've had some challenges. You know that better than I do. So I know the Board of Commissioners, who's also the special advisor, asked me that specific question today. So.
Sure, thank you, Tamara. Again, my name is land use specialist in all of that. I'll attack that the best way I know how. So off the bat, working with landowners to secure easements. We're currently in negotiations, and as you saw, we showed 4 different routes. We showed a site boundary that was encompassed quite a bit more property than just what our routes were. So we did that to allow for wiggle room as working with landowners, if there was a small change or a hiccup where they want us to evaluate another route, move on. But we are working with each landowner individually to negotiate easements.
Do you happen to have a map?
It might not show parcel boundaries, but I know the area pretty well.
So I'm pretty bad to understand the depot, but the northerly route that looks like the stalls.
Yep.
And then the southerly that parallels, I think that's the Port of Morrow property.
Yep.
Then what, I don't know farther west.
So just west of the Port of Morrow property, unless I might take that pointer from you. You're doing a great job. So just looking at the routes, so starting with A, off of the CDA, we go on this potential route shows on the stalls. And then it jumps over to Windy River, onto Terrapama, and then into our 730 switch yard. We've got Route B off of the CDA property that is on Port of Morrow, Windy River, and then Terrapama as well into our 730 switch yard. And that entire route is south of the railroad in that area. We'll go to Route C just to keep it in alphabetical order. We would cross I-84 onto Agra Northwest, which would then touch Windy River, the Port of Morrow, and then cross I-84 again into our Highway 730 switch yard. And then
That would be two interstate crossings.
correct. And then Route D off of the Army Depot is again Port of Morrow, Windy River, Terrapama, and then into our Highway 730 switch yard.
And based on that, it looks like all 4 alternatives are the same until you reach the west boundary.
Correct. So since we have acquired the easement across the CDA property, we feel comfortable in showing that. But as Derek mentioned, we did encompass a larger site boundary in case there were some changes where we needed to route around. So we have allowed us some wiggle room to not force an amendment, hopefully later on in the process where we could have encompassed it in our site boundary now.
That's just really helpful. So just passing on a note that I heard just this morning. So So, you know, Patrick's been in our office multiple times, coordinating everything. Appreciate all of that. So, any other questions?
Perfect, thank you.
Just wanted to see if else in the room wanted to comment, provide fill out a comment card. Being none, I will check in and see if we have anyone on the webinar. Oh, yeah. Well, for those on the webinar, in order to raise your hand, there's a button on the bottom right of the main window that set of icons. If you click on participants, there's a hand icon that will indicate you raising your hand. So should you like to comment tonight via the webinar, please click that hand icon. Oh, okay. And we have one council member, Bayer, who's raising her hand. And you're unmuted, Councilmember Bayer.
Great, thank you. I just wanted to thank Jay's and the applicants for really good presentation. And many thanks to those who took time to come in and give us comments. It's important for us to hear these local views. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Bayer. Nancy, is there anyone else on the webinar? Okay. Next, we'll turn to phone participants if we have any. And in order to raise your hand, that wants to comment tonight via the phone, please press *3 on your telephone keypad to raise your hand. And is there anyone, Nancy? No phone participants with their hands up. We'll go. We'll pause here just to see if anyone wants to raise their hand via the webinar or phone line or in person. But I guess in the meantime, I just wanted to clarify that in addition to the opportunity to comment tonight, you also have an opportunity to comment and submit written comments throughout the comment period. Comment period deadline is December 1st of this year. You can submit comments via our online comment portal, which is on the project page itself, or you can submit an email or regular letter, regular mail, or you can fax me your comments through the comment deadline. And with that, getting a nod or a shake from Nancy with no other commenters raising hands, I think we can call it. Thank you very much, everyone. Really appreciate it. Thank you.